A mother would claim someone broke into her home and killed her son, but she would go to prison for it.
And she fell off a 10th floor balcony while she was on a hen party in Benidorm.
Amanda was 16 years old when it ended abruptly. According to Nickelodeon, Amanda ended the show herself.
A mother would claim someone broke into her home and killed her son, but she would go to prison for it. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Joel Kirkpatrick. Viewer discretion is advised. Joel was the 10-year-old son of Julie Ray, who had recently divorced his father, Len Kirkpatrick. Joel was described by many as a very bubbly young boy who seemed to want to make everyone happy around him. He had this incredible gift to just put a smile on everyone's face, even if it was like a time of dread. Now, there would end up being a tumultuous custody battle between Julie and Len. Len would end up getting custody of the boy to stay at his house primarily, and Julie got to see Joel on the weekends. On the evening of October 13th, 1997, in Julie's Lawrenceville, Illinois home, she would have over a friend of hers who also brought over their young boy. Now, Julie even offered that person to stay the night, but the friend said, we'll go home. Julie would tuck her 10-year-old son into bed that night, and then around 4 o'clock in the morning, she awoke to the screams of a child. She immediately got up and ran to Joel's bedroom, and when she got in there, all of a sudden, a man in a black ski mask came charging towards her. Julie then chased this intruder outside of the house, where he managed to knock her over and get away, and before doing so, he pulled off his ski mask. Julie then ran to a neighbor's house to get someone to call 911. When police arrived, they found Joel in his bedroom. He had fallen between the mattress and the backboard, and he was stabbed repeatedly, and he was deceased. The front door of the home was locked. There was no sign of forced entry. The intruder broke a back window while they were trying to flee, but left no real evidence of themselves behind. Julie had a bruise over her eye, stating that she was punched by the intruder. Julie did have a drop or two of blood on her shirt, and that blood would eventually match that of her son. Police then thought, why would a random man just break into a random house, kill a 10-year-old boy, and then leave? The house wasn't ransacked, so police arrested Julie, charged her with the murder. Now, the blood on her shirt, there should have been a lot more if she was stabbing her son to death. But even still, the jury convicted her and she got 60 years in prison. And then in the early 2000s, an author received a note from serial killer Tommy Lynn Sells. I've covered him before. He confessed to killing Joel Kirkpatrick. Police interviewed him. He described things that nobody should have known about the murder, like very fine details. He said sometimes you don't need a reason to do things. So her conviction was overturned. Tommy Sells died in prison.
This is Kirsty Maxwell. She's a 27-year-old girl, and she fell off a 10th floor balcony while she was on a hen party in Benidorm. Her death was ruled as not suspicious, however the facts of the story, they may prove otherwise. On the 28th of April 2017, 27-year-old Kirsty and 19 of her friends went to Benidorm to celebrate a hen party. They went out to party on the strip in Benidorm as soon as they arrived. Kirsty, which is the woman on the left, she was seen on CCTV arriving back to her hotel at around 5 AM in the morning. They were all drinking and intoxicated. After they got home, Kirsty went up to her room on the 9th floor and fell asleep. Her friend, who was still out on the town, she came back at around 6 AM and she seen Kirsty still asleep. At around 7:30 AM, Kirsty was found dead laying next to the pool. It was clear she fell from the balcony. It was determined Kirsty she had fallen from the 10th floor, which was weird because Kirsty she stayed on the 9th floor. What would she be doing up on the 10th floor? On the 10th floor in room number 10E, 5 British men were also on holiday. They said in the AM Kirsty knocked on their door. She was let in by the men and then she was told it was not her room. However, Kirsty went into the bathroom and climbed out the window and then she fell off the balcony. This is a story all the men in the room stuck to, and it is what the police say happened. It is believed Kirsty woke up during the night and she went to one of her friends' rooms, which was on the 9th floor also. It is not sure what she was actually looking for from her friends at that hour in the morning, but none of them answered. It is believed Kirsty went back to her hotel room and she realised she locked herself out. She then went up to the 10th floor, and it is believed she tried to get to her balcony from the 10th floor balcony. And at some point, unfortunately, Kirsty fell to her death. This is what the Spanish police say happened, but a lot of people think something more sinister happened. Let me know what you think of this case.
You will not believe this insane plot twist. In 2008, Carolyn Watson and Julian Butchwald were a young religious couple. They were living in Melbourne, Australia, and had been together around 2 years. Julian was driving the pair to a picnic date in the car, but he actually stopped the car suddenly, noticing an animal on the side of the road. Suddenly, something horrific happened. Carolyn's vision went completely black after being blindfolded by a terrifying masked man. All she could work out was she was being stripped off and thrown into a vehicle. The car finally stopped and she took her blindfold off, and she was really relieved to see that her boyfriend was by her side. He'd also been stripped off, and the couple were completely in the middle of nowhere. The pair managed to untie themselves, but were having to just wander around aimlessly for a week, trying to find safety. Meanwhile, police were desperately searching for the couple. Family and friends were really concerned, and they knew how out of character this was for the pair to go missing. They sent out air and water search teams, but just couldn't locate the couple. As the missing pair were very religious, they'd actually vowed to be celibate until marriage, but Julian started to suggest that it might be a good idea to break this celibacy in order to keep them warm. Finally, a local farmer found the couple and alerted police. However, they quickly found that the story didn't really add up. Julian soon confessed to police that he'd actually made the whole thing up and he'd staged the kidnapping. His motive was purely to try and get his girlfriend to break their vow of celibacy.
I've had a ton of requests to do this case, so this is the case of Ayla Reynolds, a beautiful 20-month-old baby girl who was reported missing in December 2011 after being allegedly abducted in the middle of the night while in her father's care. Ayla Reynolds was born on April 4th, 2010 to her parents, Justin DePietro and Trista Reynolds. They were no longer together at the time of her birth. They only had a short fling in 2009, and Justin was not interested in becoming a father. She actually had to get a paternity test done in July 2010 to prove that Justin was the father, and only then did he accept that Ayla was his child. About a year into Ayla's life, Justin decided that he wanted to start having visitation with her, and so he would drive to Portland, which is about an hour and a half away from where he was living at the time, and he would start to have these daytime visits. Trista mentioned that sometimes after these visits, Ayla would come home with mysterious bruises on her legs or small injuries that she couldn't really explain, and when she asked Justin about it, he would kind of just brush it away and say that she got them playing with kids in the balls at Chuck E. Cheese, but Trista did note that there weren't any balls at Chuck E. Cheese. She also mentioned that Ayla came home really unhappy from these visitations and that she seemed to be scared of her dad. Trista also gave birth to another baby boy named Raymond 11 months after Ayla, and so she had 2 children in her care at that time, Raymond and Ayla. Unfortunately, Trista also struggled with substance abuse, and I don't know what premeditated this visit, but she did get a visit 2 months before Ayla went missing from CPS, and they gave her an ultimatum that she either needed to go to an inpatient rehab program or she would lose her kids. So that very same day, she checked herself into an inpatient treatment program, and she gave her kids over to her mom, Becca, and her sister Jessica, so that they could watch her while she was completing this program. About 4 days into Trista's treatment, Justin decided that he should be the one that has custody of his daughter, and so he contacted CPS, and they actually agreed with him and said that he is the father and there is no formal custody agreement in place, and so he has every right to come and take his child. Trista's family did not give Ayla up easily, and they said that she was terrified of her father, and when her father came to collect her, I guess she was screaming and crying and wailing and did not want to go. On October 20th, 2 days before Trista completed treatment, they had a sort of family meeting that had 3 CPS representatives involved. Trista was there, Justin was there by phone, and a couple other people, and they talked about what was going to happen with Ayla going forward. It was determined that Ayla would be given back to her mother the day that she followed the residential treatment program, and that Justin was supposed to deliver her, but that never did happen. In the weeks that followed, Trista called CPS repeatedly trying to get their help in enforcing this agreement, but she didn't really get anywhere, and so eventually she formed a temporary agreement with Justin that he could keep Ayla and she would have regular visitation, but she did have concerns about his parenting. Stay tuned for part 2. So after Trista completed her residential treatment program, she was supposed to have Ayla return to her care, but unfortunately her ex-boyfriend did not do that and was kind of keeping her. And so she came to an agreement that I guess for the time being he could have full custody and she would get visitation rights because Justin claimed that she wasn't fit to care for their child. On November 12th, while still in Justin's care, he ended up taking Ayla to the emergency, and after a bunch of x-rays and stuff done on her arm, the doctor determined that she had broken her upper arm at the elbow joint. And when asked about it, Justin told the doctor that he was carrying her on the porch when it was raining the night before, and he accidentally slipped and fell and must have landed on her arm and injured it, but didn't realize anything was actually wrong until the next morning when he brought her to the doctor. At this point, Trista and Justin were constantly arguing about custody, visitation, and even just getting Ayla on the phone to talk to her mom. And so finally, Trista had enough and she started the legal process where she was going to file for full custody of Ayla. And unfortunately, it was only 2 days later that Ayla was reported missing by her dad. On December 17th, 2011, Justin called the police to let them know that his daughter had basically disappeared in the middle of the night and he didn't know where she was. At the time, Justin and Ayla had been living in Justin's mother's home, Phoebe, as well as with his sister Alicia and her young baby who was around the same age as Ayla. And the night apparently that she went missing, there were 3 adults in the home, his then girlfriend Courtney, his sister Alicia, and himself. And he claims that he put Ayla to bed around 8 p.m. that night and everything was fine. And then when he woke up the next morning, she was gone and he didn't hear or see anything, and neither did any of the other adults who were in the home. The police and law enforcement started to search basically everywhere for baby Ayla. They searched all of the water that surrounded this area. They had so many volunteers come out. They searched high and low, but they couldn't find anything. But not long after, through evidence they found in the home and just the circumstances surrounding her going missing, they concluded that there was probably foul play involved. Justin and his family denied all allegations of foul play, and they said that somebody must have abducted her, and Justin even kind of insinuated that Trista may have something to do with the abduction. Law enforcement removed Justin and his family from their home while they did their investigating, and they also seized their vehicles. And a couple of months later, they sat Trista down and showed her some of the evidence that they had collected. As well as the evidence, which I will go into next, law enforcement also told Trista something unbelievable, that the morning that Ayla had disappeared, Justin had driven all the way to Portland and back before he had called 911. Stay tuned for the last part. So law enforcement sat Trista and her family down to share with them the evidence that they had collected from Justin's family home, and they also shared with her something that was shocking, that before he actually called 911, he had driven an hour and a half to Portland, and when he was asked about this by law enforcement, he said that he drove to Portland because he thought Trista had abducted their baby, but he never once tried to contact Trista or anybody in her family, but he did call one of his buddies, Derek, who had previously a month earlier sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Ayla. Just a little warning, these are the details of Ayla's blood that they located. In Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer, in her car seat in the back on the strap, they found dried blood, and they also found dried vomit in the back seat. In Ayla's bedroom, there was blood found on her pink pom-pom slippers that were sitting right next to her crib, and her baby doll's face was smeared with blood, and investigators believe that she may have tried to wipe her own bloody mouth with her toy that she used to comfort herself. And then on the couch in the living room, there was a silver dollar-sized blood stain found on the couch, as well as the majority of blood was found in the basement. A fist-sized pool of Ayla's blood was found in the center of Justin's mattress, and there was also blood splattered kind of all over the wall from a child's height that would have been around her height standing at 20 months old. The investigators say that the blood splatters had to be either a blunt force trauma or projectile vomiting. And there was also a blue plastic sheet and a bin that contained blood, and they said that there was a sheet that had been used to clean up Ayla's blood. They also shared that they used the chemical luminol, which will glow blue when it comes into contact with trace amounts of blood, and it also will indicate whether bleach or other chemical agents have been used to clean an area, and they did have evidence that that was the case. Justin's family claims the reason for all the blood around the home and in the back seat was that Ayla had a stomach issue and lactose problems, and she would often vomit up blood. And despite all of this evidence, no arrests were ever made. It wasn't until 2017, some 6 years later, that Trista went before a judge and had Ayla declared legally dead so that she could start to take matters into her own hands. The judge did declare Ayla legally dead, and then shortly thereafter, Trista filed a civil wrongful death lawsuit against Justin. This lawsuit will force Justin to answer questions under oath about the disappearance of his daughter, although he will never serve jail time because it's not a criminal charge. The most that she could ever get was money, but she said that she's not looking for money, she just wants truth and justice for Ayla. And just this last February 2022, Trista also had his sister Alicia and his mother Phoebe added to the lawsuit as well. I pray Ayla gets the justice she deserves.